All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar. I feel like we haven't had a webinar in a while, so I'm glad to see people that we might not otherwise be able to see for an in-person event wherever you are. If you're watching on Zoom or on Facebook Live, we appreciate you for being here. My name is Caleb Talley. I'm the Director of Marketing and Events at Startup Junkie. Startup Junkie, for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, we're a mission-driven organization based here in Northwest Arkansas that exists to serve entrepreneurs and innovators. And we do that largely in two ways. One way is through consulting, one-on-one consulting with individuals from idea stage and beyond. And we have a team of consultants with diverse backgrounds that can help just about anybody. If we can't help you, we can plug you in with somebody that can kind of operate like a switchboard. We'll plug you in with somebody that can help you get you connected. And then the other facet of how we help entrepreneurs and innovators is through events. So whether that's a networking event like we had here in Northwest Arkansas on Tuesday, or a virtual webinar like you're in right now, we do that as a service to our community to educate, connect, build community. And so today we're going to talk about Lean Canvas, but also customer discovery, because today is National Get to Know Your Customer Day. And I don't know that there's any real relevance between the two, but I have a calendar that tells me all the wonderful national days of the year that sits across my desk. And so I'm leaning into some of those days. We missed National French Fry Day earlier in this week, but we're not going to miss Get to Know Your Customer Day today. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to today's presenter, Startup Junkie founder and managing director, Jeff Amerine. I will let you take it away.
All right. Thanks very much, Caleb. And every day ought to be National Get to Know Your Customer Day, because if you're in business, that's what the game is really all about. So let's get into it a little bit here. I'm happy to be with you today. This is, we were just talking, this is Friday Eve. And so for those of you that are so inclined, you've got about 30 more minutes before you can pull out the bourbon or the beer and begin to celebrate the weekend a little early. We'll go over a few things here. I want to give just a little bit more background on Startup Junkie. I know a lot of times we'll have people on these broadcasts or that watch us on Facebook Live that aren't familiar with us or the model. And I won't spend too much time on it, but just so that you get the whole picture of who we are and what we do. We're gonna talk about customer discovery, but it's almost impossible to cover customer discovery without talking about that other part of the toolkit, the Lean Canvas, which is a good repository for the things you find as you begin to really engage and develop your customer relationships. So here we go. All right, who are we? Well, when we talk about Startup Junkie, it's really kind of a family of related entities that all work together. Startup Junkie Consulting, plus the Startup Junkie Foundation, which is our affiliated 501c3 separate organization, and the Conductor are the three entrepreneurial support organizations that all work extremely closely together, all have kind of a common point of origination. And together, we're the largest group in Arkansas that provides these sorts of support services. We were founded back in 2008. That's when it was just sort of an ad hoc side hustle for me. It's always had kind of a unique business model in that all services are free and third-party funded. So we like working with entrepreneurs from concept stage all the way through to those that are really about to break out, that are getting to $10 to $15 million in revenues. Team now has about 33 across all of our entities, and that includes full-time, part-time, and contractors. So entrepreneurial support organization, the services are no cost, and we're really glad to be engaging with you in this type of useful workshops and programming. And this is the shameless plug for the book, but it was a 13-year odyssey, so I figured it'd be worth putting it in there to capture what's been done by the team really over the course of the last 13 years. We wrote this book that was published last year, available on Amazon in multiple different forms, called Creating Startup Junkies. And the whole idea is, how do you build a sustainable venture ecosystem in an unexpected place? It's written primarily by Jeff Standrich and myself, with a ton of contributions from the team members. Available in hard copy, Kindle, and audiobook. It's a little bit inspiration, so there's something in there for entrepreneurs and inventors. And it's a lot of toolkit for those that are looking to try to build an economic empowerment engine in an unexpected place, wherever you may be. All right, now on to the meat of the matter. We're going to talk principally about lean startup and customer discovery methods. So you might think about the applicability. So we're getting ready to talk about some tools, and what's the applicability? It's pretty broad applicability. If you want to launch a business, start a business brand new, or you've got an existing business and you want to launch a new product, or you've got an existing business and you want to launch a new service, or for that matter, if you're a university researcher and you're trying to figure out what are the right research areas where we can really solve a big problem and there's substantial demand and it's something that's meaningful. You go through all that, you might say then, well, what are you going to do? How do you even get started? Well, there's some fundamental flaws in the conventional wisdom that we think about when we think about how to launch a new product, a new service, or and what are some of those? Well, there's some painful statistics that historically in the 20th century, as Steve Blanks from Stanford would say, the historical process of writing a big business plan, of doing some third-party research, of launching something and never really engaging with your customer leads to a lot of failures. In fact, the number one mistake, and it's not just that startups make, it's that product teams make, it's that nonprofits make when they're trying to launch a new service, is they find they built something that nobody wants. They built something that doesn't resonate, that doesn't sell, that doesn't achieve the results. In fact, an interesting statistic that is not shown on here is that Carnegie Mellon, that's done a lot of research on software development projects across the spectrum of large and small businesses, said that only 4% of all software development projects deliver something that meets their customer requirements internally or externally, that finishes on time and it stays within budget. And that's largely because in many instances, they've started out by building something that really doesn't meet the need, that their customer doesn't want. So what can you do about that? Well, first of all, part of it is just a mindset. If I could take you all back to the days when you were in maybe 5th or 6th grade in your primary education and you had that basic science class, you learn some things about the scientific method. And the fundamental principle of the scientific method is you're going to come up with a hypothesis and you're going to either prove or disprove that hypothesis through a variety of different tests and steps to validate your thinking. The same exact principle that you learned in K through 12 can be used in validating that new business model, that new product that you want to launch, that new service you want to launch. And one of the toolkits that makes it simple to capture your assumptions is the lean canvas. And we're going to talk about that. To complement the lean canvas, after you write all your assumptions down, you've got to do a good job with customer discovery or customer development. And what is that? That is not sending a survey monkey survey out. That is not, doing a Google search and seeing what Gartner or Frost and Sullivan or any of the third-party research says. That's actually engaging with the customer in an unbiased way. The other mindset is you've got to be objective. We always try to encourage people to be consultants to their own ideas. So divorce yourself from the love affair that you're inevitably having with your own ideas. Take a step back. Look at it completely objectively. And then the final one is to listen to the market. When we say listen to the market, we're talking about as you're going through customer discovery, really pay attention not only to what your customers say, but what you observe them doing. And if you want to know the basis for all the thinking and discussion we have here, these are 4 of the sort of seminal books around this whole process of lean canvas and customer discovery. Running Lean, the Lean Startup, Business Model Generation, the Startup Owner's Manual. This was all started by a guy named Steve Blank. Eric Ries has been intimately involved with it. And the one we like the best in terms of format was written by Ash Moria. All these are relatively inexpensive tools that are available to you. So let's get into the lean canvas methodology. Well, the goal, what is the goal? Why would we go through something that's so much different than the conventional business planning process? The fundamental thing, kind of like they did in Moneyball, is you want to improve your odds of success. For those of you that are familiar with that movie, Moneyball, they found that the Oakland A's general manager, through statistical methods, realized that on-base percentage is what really was going to determine the success of a baseball player. So if you got a bunch of people on your roster that are really good at getting on base, your chance of winning, even with a lower spend on salaries, was probably going to be greater. What we're trying to do is to find those Moneyball tools for the startup world that can improve our odds. And the odds are really against you. When you launch a new product, you launch a new service, you build a new business, there's a ton of early failures, lots of strikeouts. And I mean, it's an ugly process. The failure rate is high. So what can we do to improve that process and create more winners? We want to shift that curve. I mean, ideally, you'd like to not only improve the 1-year success rate, you'd also like to improve the 5-year success rate for that new venture, for that product, or for that service. And this is where, if you do that and you're really thoughtful using the methodology we're going to talk about in finding that product market fit, the product is serving a market with the pricing and the features and the functions and the benefits that the market wants. Product market fit is what startups and product teams and people developing new services need to get to. Is it the right product, the right time, the right price to meet the market need? That's what you're searching for. And ultimately, if you get there, you're going to have the business model fit. You're offering the right terms, you're offering the right pricing. Once you get the business model fit, then you can think about scaling something up and really growing it. But these are the two factors we're searching for. Now I'm going to take you back a second. Let's back up a minute. We use this term lean, and I'm for sure that there's going to be people watching this or listening to this that understand a little bit about where lean came from. When Deming first launched lean concepts, it was actually thrown out of Detroit back in the 1950s. They didn't want to do any of this crazy thinking that he had about managing waste. They didn't understand it. So he went to Japan and actually helped the Japanese at the time, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, build a real juggernaut in the automobile industry. And the fundamental thought process behind lean is that any activity that does not add stakeholder value is waste. So if it doesn't add value to your customers, if it doesn't add value to your associates, if it doesn't add value to your shareholders, it's probably waste. And that process, as many of you know, is one of lining up all the processes you're going to do in any kind of business function or manufacturing activity and asking that hard question and getting rid of those things that truly don't deliver value. Well, writing a 50-page business plan, building a full-up product before you've actually gone out and determined, is there a business model? Is there a real problem here? Is this something anyone would care about? Is the definition of waste. So where lean comes in is we, through this process, want to make sure that you don't spend a lot of time and money doing something that's not going to resonate with the market. We want you to do things in the right order. So get that early customer validation. And we're going to talk about how to do that. The first thing in this step that's outlined in running lean, this ties together, dovetails nicely between lean canvas and customer discovery, is you document the plan on a one-page business canvas. We're going to show that to you here in just a second. You're really writing down your assumptions or your guesses in every box, and there's 9 boxes on the lean canvas that we're going to look at. The second thing is this is all about an exercise in not just problem solving, but in risk management. You're going to identify the riskiest parts of the plan. So which of your assumptions, if they're not addressed appropriately, would create the greatest risk of failure? And if you can identify that and then prioritize how you address those, then you're going to be more successful in building something that's going to really get that product market fit that you want. The third step, once you've done that, is you're going to systematically test your assumptions early and often through low-cost means of tests through both qualitative and quantitative customer discovery and customer development. We're going to talk specifically about what we mean by qualitative inquiry. It's a process of asking good open-ended questions. If you want to know a lot more about this, in addition to leanstack.com, which is Ash Maurya's site, check out the Startup Junkies YouTube channel, where there's just a ton of information available on both customer discovery, lean canvas, risk management, and a variety of other things that are related. You can find that at the Startup Junkie YouTube channel. So here's what this thing looks like. And I have to tell you, first time I saw the lean canvas, I thought, I can't really believe somebody got paid to put this together. It's just too simple. It's just so straightforward. I mean, where's the special sauce? Where's the nuance? And what you realize is the best tools are the ones that are simplest to understand. But this is where you start. This is the modern way that that new products, new services, and new ventures begin in terms of capturing your thinking. You'll start with the problem first, always the problem first. We as human beings tend to gravitate towards the solution. We instantly want to jump into features and functions, and this is what it's going to do, and this is what it ought to be. We just assume that we know everything about the problem. Don't do that. Leave the solution. In fact, we'll talk about the order in just a minute, but you'll start with the problem. You'll identify your problem statement that captures that hypothesis or that unmet need that you think is out there in the world. And then you'll list the 3 most compelling attributes of that problem or that unmet need. The very next thing you'll do, rather than working on a solution, is you'll go to the customer segments. You'll think of who are the target customers, and you'll get specific. You won't talk about industries. You won't talk about macro level stuff. You'll be specific. Our customers for this are the vice presidents of product management in this type of company. Our customers for this are the directors of sales in this type of company. So you'll get specific when you identify your customers and your customer segments. The next place you'll move to once you do those 2 is you'll spend time thinking about, all right, I know what my problems or my unmet needs are. What are the solutions that will address this? And you'll think about not just the top 3 features, but what are the benefits? Customers tend to buy benefits. So what is the benefit that enterprise customer or that consumer is going to derive from this? So the example I often give is, I didn't buy a large screen TV because I had to have ultra 8K, list the specs. I bought that large screen TV, that gigantic 75-inch TV, so I didn't miss a single play in Razorback football, so that I could see every play during Razorback basketball or baseball. I wanted to have that immersive experience watching the sports games and the movies that were of interest to me. So the benefit is that immersive experience, that feeling like you're there, not whatever the technical specifications were. At the same time you're working on solution, you'll think about what's the unique value proposition. Well, the one that we're all intimately familiar with that's used quite frequently is save money and live better. That's probably one of the best unique value propositions ever. The full thing would be save money and live better through everyday low pricing delivered by the world's most efficient supply chain. That's kind of the whole picture. So it's more than just the tagline. It's a statement that really captures what is unique that that company, that product or that service is offering. So you spend time on that. And what I'm going to do now is actually flip to the next slide, give you a little bit more on the order. So remember, you're going to start this out with problem, with customer segment, with solution, and unique value proposition. That's kind of the desired order. And you're not writing an entire book and filling up all the white space. This is not an opportunity to try to fit a 20-page business plan into a single page with really small font. These are short, crisp statements. Think about it like adding headlines to the newspaper without any of the other text. You're just capturing the headlines. Next thing you'll do is you'll think about what is our unfair advantage. So for every new business, every product, every service, there ought to be something that you can do that can't be easily copied or bought. Now, sometimes that can be intellectual property, that can be trademarks, that can be copyrighted material, that can be trade secrets, that can be patents. Sometimes it's really unique subject matter expertise that can't be easily copied by others. Sometimes it's unique relationships. Unless you're just going to somehow jump to scale quickly and compete on the basis of price, it's really important to try to zero in on what's going to be our unfair competitive advantage, the thing against which we can build an economic moat for the business. Now, once you get through that, you're going to think, well, how do we make money? What is the revenue model? What's it going to take in order for this business to generate revenue streams such that it can be viable? And again, you're not putting in the whole top end of your income statement, but you are thinking about those particular revenue streams that could be meaningful to the business. And sometimes if it's something where there's a repurchase rate, you might think about lifetime value. So in other words, how often is that customer going to come back and buy what you have. Lifetime value is often used these days in e-commerce businesses where you've got your customer acquisition cost and lifetime value, but any business ought to be thinking about that. Really expensive to get a customer initially. How do you keep them, and what are they going to continue to buy from you in the future? And then the next thing is cost structure. What's it going to cost? These are those elements of cost and expense that it's going to take in order for you to deliver the new product, new service, or new venture you're talking about. And then finally, you'll put some things in there around how you're going to measure progress. What are the key milestones that you'll achieve during the planning timeframe for your new venture, your new product, your new service that will show meaningful progress? So it can be things like number of new customers added. It could be product launches. It can be a revenue metric. It shouldn't be 15 things, but it ought to be 3 or 4 things that you can measure to show progress. And then finally, how are we going to get to customers? What's our path to customers? Are we going to sell directly? Are we going to use indirect channels? Are we going to use online, digital means of getting to our customers? How are we going to get to them? You go through this whole thing, not just one time, but multiple iterations as you do your customer discovery and capture key learnings. But the first time you go through it ought to be a 30, 45-minute, maybe hour exercise. Okay, so that's lean canvas. And here's an example of a lean canvas. This is actually the lean canvas for the lean canvas that was developed by Ash Maurya. And it was the basis for why he thought he should build the book. Now you can see here, I'm not going to go through all these points, but you can see here that he was very concise. You'll notice some other things that are in there as well in the boxes where you've got under problem, existing alternatives. That gives you a little bit of opportunity to talk about the competitive landscape. You've got a unique value proposition, high level concept. That's where you can say, we are the Uber of, we are the Airbnb of, whatever it is, something that makes it relatable. And then under customer segments, you'll notice early adopters. And the reason why it's important to identify them is that's where you're going to tend to try to sell first. More importantly, that's where you're going to do your customer discovery in the beginning as well. Those early adopters, the ones that are likely to talk to you. Very simple. This is what these look like. This shows a little bit of a modification of the lean canvas in that it's got purpose added at the top. This was a purpose-driven social venture, and it's got impact at the bottom. So again, the lean canvas has a variety of different variations. And remember, this is a tool set. The key thing is the mindset of challenging your assumptions and going through that iterative process of learning to try to pick up as much as you can to find out whether or not your assumptions are valid or invalid. That's how you will truly be doing the sort of lean canvas methodology. The other thing I'd say too is Deming said that in God we trust, all others bring data. So when you first go through a lean canvas, you're going to have a bunch of guesses and assumptions, and there's probably not any real facts that are built into it. You might have some third-party data and stats that you can put in. Over time, every assertion that you make in a lean canvas, you want to back up with data. Now, where's that data going to come from? It could come from a third-party study, but what our hope is that you pick up a lot of meaningful data in terms of sentiment and preferences and key themes from your customer discovery, which is the segue to the part that is kind of central to this. Another great book that was written on customer discovery and customer development, readily available in PDF form, low cost or no cost, is called Talking to Humans, written by a guy named Giff Constable out of NYU Stern. He was a lean canvas aficionado, right? He's a serial entrepreneur. He's somebody that really liked it. But what he realized was none of the other information that was available, the books were written, none of them really gave you a good idea of how to ask really great questions, how to engage with that customer in a way that would allow you to get to true demand without inserting that confirmation bias that we all need to be concerned about. So what are kind of the key points around that? And this is a point where people tend to clear their throat and they kind of choke when they see this, particularly if they're introverted or they're highly technical or they're introverts. They look at that and they say, golly, 100 interviews. And so people think, well, I know how I'm going to beat that. I'm just going to send out SurveyMonkey and get 300 responses. That is not the step to take here. This is 100 face-to-face or Zoom type of interviews where you're actually engaging in a conversation. Preferences face-to-face or Zoom, telepresence type of stuff. Second best is phone. Email is almost completely useless. and don't do surveys here. That's not what's intended. The other key thing is it's open-ended questions. Now, let me take a step back. When we say aim for 100 interviews, get yourself a really good gut check with 10 interviews. And these are not friends and family. Particularly in the South, if you go out and talk to 10 members of your friends and family, even if you do a good job with open-ended questions, you're going to get a highly biased result. Nobody ever wants to hurt anybody's feelings unless you find the encoded, well, bless your heart in their responses. You're not going to know that your idea stinks. You're just not going to know that you're on to anything good. So it's got to be people you don't know really well that are going to be completely objective. Start with 10, get a gut check, see if you're on the right track. Once you get through that 10, you maybe pick up a couple of themes, then you can do the next 90. That's sort of the best practice. Ideally, have 2 interviewers, one to conduct the interview, ask the questions, engage, another one that can actually take good notes, record what's happening, can look for those nonverbal cues, etc. And remember, you're looking for pain. You're looking to learn. You're not looking to sell. This is not about selling. In fact, you shouldn't even be disclosing your idea. Nothing about your solution here. This is all about finding out if you've got a real problem or unmet need that's worth solving. So here's some examples, and these are enterprise oriented, but you kind of get the flavor of what you would ask. And by the way, it's not 50 questions or 100 questions. It's 5 to 10 really good open-ended questions that you can use as a guide. You can even deviate from it as you begin to pick up heat and energy as you go. But these are the sort of questions that make sense. You might talk to someone at a company and say, what are the top 5 problems or opportunities your company faces today? That could be a way that you could begin the conversation. The next thing you might say, how do you solve that problem today? The next thing you might get into, because it's important, remember, in enterprises, they only buy if something's going to drive revenues or reduce costs. What's the economic impact of that problem? Then you can find out something about who else is in there. How would you rate existing solutions to this problem today? You might say, what is the total cost of ownership of your current solution? It forces them to think about, well, this is what I paid for it up front. This is what it costs me on a recurring basis. And then you might want to know something about their budget cycle. So you'd say, how do you currently purchase enterprise solutions? You notice there's nowhere in here where I say, hey, this is the product we've got. What do you think? That's not what you want to do. There's also no yes, no questions. So to do a really great job in customer discovery, it's open-ended questions where you ask the question and you listen. And you might find something as they begin to talk to you in the terms of their business and in their words. You might find some things where you've got to go deeper. And so you can ask follow-on questions. You can deviate from the script, but not yes, no, not multiple choice, not Likert scale, none of that stuff. This is all about, I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to listen to what you tell me. Really, really critical. And if you do this well, the amount that you can learn along the way is really important. And the other thing is you've got to have conviction to say, based on what I learn and based on what I observe, I'm not going to be so beholden to my original idea that I don't change it. You've got to take a step back, divorce yourself from that love affair with your own idea and really listen to the market. Okay, we're right at about 30 minutes. And I know I fired through that in fire hose type of fashion, but here's contact information for the Startup Junkie up here. That's my contact info. And there's, another good view of the book, and I'm ready to take any questions anybody might have about Lean Canvas or customer discovery.
And you're more than welcome to unmute and ask your questions out loud, but if you'd prefer to drop your question in the chat, we'll read those as well.
I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you now. Don't be shy.
Hey, Jeff. I'm familiar with, I guess it's a variation of this business model canvas.
Sure.
And I guess in my mind, I was thinking they were the same things, and I didn't realize these little differences. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what those differences are and why they're different? And did one come before the other?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. And so the business model canvas is a little bit like DOS. And the the lean canvas is a little bit like the latest version of Windows. So, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but the world started around the business model canvas that Steve Blank created. And it had stuff on there. It didn't have a clear articulation of problem. It had value proposition. It had things like key resources on there. They're fundamentally the same, but as the followers of Steve Blank looked at using the business model canvas in practice, they said, you know, we need to be real definitive about problem and customer and unique value proposition and unfair advantage. And so he refined it. He built on the stuff that Aries and Steve Blanks had done before, and both still get used. National Science Foundation I-Corps program will use the business model canvas. Sometimes large companies prefer the business model canvas because you're able to focus a lot more on value proposition, but there's probably 15 different variations. We tend to like the lean canvas just because it forces you to focus very clearly on problem or unmet need and on customer right up front. And that is kind of the main difference, but still, both just tools. If you go through a really good process of validating or invalidating your assumptions, both can be used extremely well.
Thanks.
And I could tell Naeem had a question. He was muted a second ago, so I'll go to him and then I'll go to the questions in the comments.
Hey, thank you for that. Jeff, just on a customer kind of experience, the 10 folks that you interviewed that are not associated with your solution or understand, should they be very specific to the industry that you're going to be kind of really starting off on? And then because your solution may go beyond your industry also, how do you adjust for that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Based on how you define your customer segments, there's a couple ways. One is you can try to capture all your customer segments that are relevant on one lean canvas, but you might run 2 or 3 or n number of customer discovery interviews so that you can get to people that have the subject matter expertise in the segment that you're specifically interested in when you're doing the calls. To start with, if you're not really sure what vertical something's going to stick in, you're going to define customers, subject matter experts, and influencers specific to each, and maybe do calls with a subset of each and find out where that heat and energy is. But it is really important to also think about, are they economic decision makers, people that can actually write checks on something down the road when I get ready to sell to them? Are they technical decision makers and influencers, or do they fit into the puzzle somewhere else? Could they be champions? So it's also important as you go through that to think about what's their persona in the process. What role do they typically fill? That help?
That was excellent. Thank you.
And then Amanda had a question in the chat. She said, where do experiments fit into the customer discovery? If I don't have a segment or customer segment, can discovery allow me to identify who my customers are? Example, manufacturing, energy, agriculture, and how do you balance sectors and industries in this phase if you can't clearly identify who your customer is?
Yeah, well, and it's you start with the shotgun in terms of, and then you get to the rifle once you learn more. Hopefully that analogy makes sense to you, but you might start by saying, well, we think we have, based on third-party research, we think we have 3 verticals that are interesting. So we're going to make a certain number of calls to the right positions, the right type of people within each one of those. And based upon what we find, we may abandon some of those early and go towards the ones where there's more interest as time goes on, or where the problems are really compelling. That's a common, particularly with platform businesses, that's a common conundrum. It's like, we can serve these 6 different verticals. Where do we start? Well, maybe look at some third-party research and find out about budgets and funding and interest and what else is going on. Start on the ones based on that with your own customer discovery. And then as you find out more, you're learning, you can focus in on the 1 or 2 that make the most sense. So yeah, it's definitely a process of iteration. It could be that you can't get there with 100 calls. It might be more than that, but it's so essential. Even though it's a little bit of a time-consuming and kind of an uncomfortable process, this is classic primary customer research that's invaluable and stuff you can't just learn from reading a third-party report. You're getting it firsthand from the customers that might at some point actually buy a solution that you would down the road create.
Then Nathan in the chat also asked, would you ever use these methods and tools on existing products and services?
100%. 100%. And I should have made that. I try to always kind of add that in: new venture, new product, new service. So if you're thinking, if you've got an existing product, 1.0 version, hardware, software, whatever it is, and you're thinking, we want to either reinvent this, we want to add to this, we want to enhance this, this same process still works. You can go through it and say, here's what we know are the unmet needs or capabilities on this product when you're thinking about problems. And you can use this very same process to come up with a new feature set for an existing product. And the discipline that you have to go through in doing that is really helpful, is very useful. It forces you to challenge your beliefs and to get customer feedback early in the process.
Hi, I'm Chris Baldwin. I'm a PhD student at the University of Arkansas. And I kind of had a question regarding, very early basic science development of a process that should lead to development of a product, and how to go about customer discovery, and, finding out, am I really wasting my time? Am I spending my time wisely in this, long science discovery venture? And how do I go doing that? I have about 1.5 years left. And so this is kind of a time where I want to start looking at seeing who the potential customers are for this.
Super, super timely and appropriate question. And I'll give you a little bit, I'm going to answer the question about a little bit of a roundabout way. The National Science Foundation created the I-Corps program because they were not happy at all with the amount of federal spend that was going to basic and applied research that wasn't resulting in any commercialization. And it was mostly because the researchers left to their own devices are going to research stuff that may be of most interest to them, whether or not there's any commercial life or not down the road. And there's nothing wrong with that, because a lot of amazing things come out of basic research, but it's not a great return on investment for spend. And as the federal dollars have historically been reducing for sponsored research, PhD level folks in universities have to look at themselves a little bit as the back office R&D arm for industry. Well, industry is not looking to go on a bunch of science projects and fishing expeditions. They've got real things that they want to solve that they can hopefully sell. Okay, with that as a backdrop, if you use a lean canvas method in thinking about what are the research areas that might be the most meaningful based upon the things you can learn from talking to potential down the road customers, subject matter experts, and others, it's going to tend to focus you to things where there could really be a commercial life. So we really encourage researchers to do that as well, to think, I could go this, let's just say you're interested in graphene. I could go this direction in graphene, and maybe I'm going to go down a road with filters, water filters, or I can go this direction and maybe there's something in energy production. Which is better? Well, go through a lean canvas process, go through some customer discovery, and you'll at least find out where some of the trends are and where that funding might, and the people you talk to could be agency heads, could be actual industry people, et cetera. But it forces you to not go in and say, hey, I was thinking of researching this and building this. It forces you to find out what's on their mind. What are their priorities? What do they think is interesting? So did that help?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
And I've got a direct message in the chat asking Jeff if you would speak to, I guess, the process of experiments and proving hypotheses wrong.
Yeah. So first of all, you've got to have kind of the level of professional maturity that you're willing to see an experiment proven wrong. And so you go out there with your assumptions, and part of your experiments are the questions that you ask. Part of it can be direct observation. Part of it down the road can be, I built a minimally viable product and I'm actually going to try it out. That's well down the road, and see early on it's got 60, 70, 80% of the functionality. But you gotta be honest. I mean, that's the fundamental thing, is it didn't work. Here's why it didn't work. Let's do the postmortem on why it didn't work. What did we learn? What are the key learnings from that? So part of it is you go with the current set of assumptions. You ask good questions that get to those assumptions based upon what you learn through the responses and through observation. You update your thinking and you try to redirect. The thing that this kind of process of discovery inevitably leads to one or more pivots in a product developer or a founder's thinking. Guaranteed, the a priori assumptions that they had about what they were going to do change if they do a job with customer discovery. So you have to be honest. You have to avoid having too much conviction around the belief that your own ideas are right. And you also have to be a good filter for what you're hearing too. Sometimes people will tell you things, even with good open-ended questions, that don't jive with what they're actually going to do. So hopefully that helped. What else?
Any more questions? And I will be downloading this, uploading this to YouTube, and I'll send this out as a link to everybody that registered if you want to, review the material, and we'll send some resources to you as well after the fact. But still, time for questions if you have a question.
Jeff, I have a question.
Sure.
You very clearly distinguish the difference between surveys and actual inquiry and customer discovery and interviews. When, if ever, is the time for mass surveys?
Yeah, and I don't mean to demean that. That can be a very useful tool in gathering data, and it can be designed in a very effective way. I think if you want to specifically test some things around pricing, or you want to get a macro level view of preferences across a broad population, surveys can be really useful, and they can be well designed. But the way the qualitative and the quantitative come together is qualitative tends to give you meaning. It's very difficult to get meaning and sentiment and that sort of visceral emotional reaction from a survey instrument. Whereas when you're face to face with someone or you're on a Zoom, you're able to read what they're saying. You can't do any forensic next step question in a survey. Whereas when I'm doing a qualitative inquiry, if somebody says, well, that's not a problem, but this really is, then I can go deeper on that. I can actually get them to elaborate more. Tell me more. That's the kind of stuff you do. So the two go together. Our preference is that people start with qualitative inquiry first. And then when they have very specific things that they can design good questions around, they can do traditional survey instruments to find out more detail in that regard. Good question. What else? It's not quite bourbon 30. We've got more time.
They'll be shy.
Caleb, I think we've worn them out.
Well, Jeff, first of all, thank you for this presentation. It's very informative. Great resource. I want to encourage everybody who's on the call, whether you're on Zoom, you're watching on Facebook Live, or you're watching, next week via YouTube, to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to help you, any questions we can answer for you. If you can schedule consulting meetings with us directly on our website that Jeff showed earlier, startupjunkie.org. We thank you for being here and participating in this. Keep an eye out for future events that we have upcoming on our Facebook page, our LinkedIn, our website. We keep all those pretty well updated. And we'll hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.